Welcome everyone to Mexican Excellence. I am super, super excited to have with me today a great poeta, an activist, a mentor, someone that's amazing, that's been an amazing source of energy and inspiration for many, many years. My tocaya, my amiga de corazón, Xitlalic Guijosa. Hey.
Hello.
Let's see the shirt. Let's see the shirt. Let's talk about the shirt.
It says tacos before vatos.
Nice. And who's that from? Where'd you get that?
She's based out of San Antonio, Texas. She's someone that I met through a friend of mine that was in Texas, and we had similar artwork. So she linked us up, and then after that, we became friends, and she's been creating shirts and all kinds of amazing merchandise. And this is by far my favorite because I love tacos.
It.
And it's always before the dudes, before the vasos.
Vámonos. I love it. I love it. I love it. So to begin tonight, first and foremost, thank you for sharing space with me. I am super excited. This is a gift. This is something that's historical for so many reasons. And I wanted to share you with the people on here, right? Just to let you know a little bit more about Citlalli. Citlalli is someone I met, early 2000s at East Los Angeles College. So shout out to ELAC, all my people from LA College. And we met as poets, activists. We did poetry readings together. She's just a very powerful poet, as you're going to witness in a few moments. But I wanted to bring her on because I want you to meet women that are kicking ass, women that are making way, women that are challenging so many systems and so many mindsets and ideologies through art, through expression, but not only through art and expression, but through also tarjetitas, which we'll get into towards the end. But with that, I wanted to have you please share some of your poetry, whatever it is, if you can kind of share what it is, the titles, a little bit more into it. And let's enjoy some beautiful quarantine poetry aquí con Xitlalic Guijosa.
Hey, all right, thank you for that. This is my first poem. It's called She's Fire. And it was inspired a little bit by my grandmother and by my grandmothers and me. I'm like me. And it's called She's Fire. Quiero que nuestra historia sea de aquellas historias que me contaba mi abuela. She would clasp both of her hands and held them close to her chin. Pues mira nada más. Su abuelo me robó. ¿Cómo lo ves? Pero yo no quiero que la mía se diga que me robaron. En mi historia quiero que se diga, pues mira, ella nunca quiso enamorarse de nadie. Y esa persona hizo hasta lo imposible para que ella le diera su atención. Era fuego puro. She was fire burning in every moment, stimulating growth and maintaining balance around her. She was fire, warm, but not hot to the touch. She was pain and love that she held in within her. The story goes that they wanted to continuously tame her burning fire when they were the ones who provoked it. She was fire, but only to fill the space with warmth and to watch her thoughts grow. She was fire and often taken advantage of. So she burned with anger. She burned like hell to anyone that lied and manipulated her fire. Quiero que mis historias cuenten que yo nunca dejé de quemar, that they never could tame me, and that I was the light in their bleak life. Quiero que se diga que mis gustos fueron muy míos, and that I was loved the way I was, y que yo así amé igual, llena de pasión, llena de fuego, llena del calor que sana. That's the first one.
Wow. Yes. Beautiful.
So that one, I wrote it because I feel like the time, especially for women, we have like that. People put like that biological timeline on us or
Mm-hmm.
time frame on us.
Right.
Um, when are you gonna fall in love or not fall in love? When are you gonna get married? Not even fall in love. Or when are you gonna partner up? Or when are you gonna have kids? And what are you waiting for? You're not getting any younger. And hearing the stories from my grandmothers, both of them, was a huge deal for me. And then I remember when I was like 5 years old, I asked my grandmother, because at this time my grandfather had passed away already. I never met him. I asked her, like, why haven't you gotten married again? And she's like, ¿pa qué? Yo no quiero sufrir. And which I thought was like the most amazing response, because, our grandmothers didn't get married because they wanted to. I mean, some of them did, and some of them, some of them did, but my grandmothers didn't. Both of my grandmothers were either married off, or one of them was married off and the other one was taken, you know? And I'm like, damn, like that. And they were really young. My grandfather was in his 30s and my grandmother was 18 or 19 years old. And I
Wow.
think about it now, I'm like, oh my God, like, how can it was somebody at 19 get married? But it happens. But it happens. But that inspired that piece. And I always feel like my grandmothers, um, my mom always inspired my poetry. My parents or my family, they always inspired my poetry. But that one was inspired by my grandmothers. But, so the next one,
Beautiful. Thank you.
the next one is called Maria de Los Angeles, and this one was inspired by my mom. Maria de Los Angeles. I carry my mommy's name always, carved right into my heart, worn proudly for 37 years. Maria de Los Angeles. Sounds like it was meant to be written in cursive with all the embellishments, all the twists and turns of her name. Who named you, Ma? Your grandfather did. Didn't he have another name other than Maria? My mommy was the fourth Maria. She had three sisters with the name Maria, none of which went by the name Maria, unless they were working. My grandparents called them by their second name. It was the way the church requested all women to be named after a saint or some virgin. There was Maria Guadalupe, Maria Consuelo, Maria Elena, and my mother, Maria de Los Angeles. My mother didn't go by her second name. She went by some diminutive of like Marie or Mary or Maria, Chankeles Maria. My cousin always spelled it Marie, like a white boy. Her name is so regal and needed to be enunciated all the way. All 8 syllables needed to be formed. This was a name fit for her, Maria de Los Angeles, California. So that's that one. And
Beautiful.
my mom, I remember sharing that poem um, at this I can't remember what it was, but it was for Affirm. It's an organization that focuses on women's rights and like domestic violence and just on women's rights in general through internationally. And I think we did it for uh, I think they were celebrating or they were discussing las mariposas, which was I believe in Nicaragua. And these mujeres who started a movement there because women weren't allowed to get educated. They weren't allowed to like practice law. They weren't allowed to do a lot of things, right? And they were under a dictatorship. And I went to this event, and I remember seeing brown women and all brown women, the majority being Mexican or like Mexican and Filipinos and Filipinas, right? And
Wow.
I was like, growing up, and I went, oh, wait, growing up Catholic, we have to remember that these two places were colonized by Spaniards that were Catholic, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they brought in that. And one of the things that they did to our ancestors is that um, we had to be named as after a saint, right? Like a saint that supposedly existed. And my grandfather was like, no, pues, les tenemos que poner María fulana, María sutana. And so my family, we have 4 Marias, my mom being the only one not having like that traditional Maria Consuelo or Maria Teresa. She has Maria de Los Angeles, which we laugh about because my mom lives in LA. So we're like, oh, Maria de Los Angeles, la que vive en Los Angeles, no Maria de Los Angeles, like her name. But it's so fitting, and she loves LA. She's a Dodger fan through and through. She's a Laker fan through and through. So she has to have like, oh, mira, tiene mi nombre, Los Angeles. And I was like, oh, okay, pues, you know. So I love that I'm able to put that, you know, very, like the story very compressed into poetry. Um, and she's always been an inspiration. She's really funny. My mom's really, really funny. A lot of people love her. I feel like sometimes me la quieren quitar, and I'm like, no, it's mía. My brothers and I always fight for her. But she always chooses me, so always chooses me. So yeah. So this next one, you know, so just so you know, I've been writing poetry for like 30 years. 30 years, no. I've been writing poetry, I want to say a little over 20 years. And it's fun. I still kind of trip out how I get inspired. I feel like poets, writers, creators are always inspired by everyday things, even like the smallest conversations or the most awkward happenings in their lives. And this poem was actually inspired by my nephew. He's actually inspired a lot of poetry. Um, and he lives with us now. And I was really stunned when I saw him put ketchup on something that shouldn't have ketchup. And I was like, dude, what the hell? You know, us growing up, we didn't have ketchup, we had salsa. We had salsa, and we had like tapatio was probably the most American thing that we had. And ketchup was like when we went to McDonald's or some hamburger place, you know? And I feel like this is part of our this is part of our identity, you know, introducing ourselves to new things, and ketchup being one of them. Ketchup being one of them. So this one's called Generation Ketchup. What do you mean there's no ketchup? The dismay in my nephew's eyes said everything, and it only made me want to laugh out loud as I offered him some salsa that my Madre Santa had made the night before for dinner. How am I supposed to eat my eggs? His eyes nearly popped out of their socket. There's salsa right here, kid. I pointed to the glass dish that held the concoction my mother so diligently made, roasting chile de árbol inside the house, like we all needed our sinus strained. It has tomatoes and garlic and salt and chile. It's like ketchup with the kick. He stood there. Here stood my nephew in disbelief, asking the most simple question known to a first generation / immigrant Mexican household. Why don't you all have ketchup in the house? There's never any ketchup. Dear second generation Mexican, you have entered the realm of shit that should be in an American household, but isn't quite American because migration is still hella real here. Our roots are still over there, and they only just started with me, your first generation tia, and you, my second generation nephew. See, ketchup when I was younger was a distant concept. There was some, but it wasn't necessarily like it is with you. We would only get them when we were well behaved and we were treated to the magic that used to be McDonald's. And your grandmother would take the extra ketchup packets home. Same with mustard. That yellow shit was never recognized until I was about 10 years old and I was given a flour that tasted divine. Yes, divine. But ketchup, as I quickly learned, was nothing but rotten tomatoes, mashed up with vinegar and maybe some sugar. Ketchup was not a veggie either, so it didn't make its way to our household. There are only a few times ketchup was acceptable, with cóctel de camarón, con papa frita, cuando visitas la tía gringa that has been living in Highland Park since the 60s. Ketchup es para los gringos, nephew. We have salsa and tapatio. We have chile peppers of all sorts and colors. So that's that one.
Ah, I
That
love
one's
it.
Generation Ketchup.
I love it. I love
So
it. I love it.
so my nephew has been a source of inspiration because he's our second generation living in this household. So we have my mom and my dad. My brothers actually were born in Tijuana, um, and but they grew up here, so they're considered first generation. And then I was born here, and so we still were very, I want to say we were very Mexican. My mom did not believe in having soda. She did not believe in having, juzgueras. She did not believe in having bologna. I was like, but the kid next door, ma. And she's like, no, eso no sé qué es. Um, you know, Yogurt was out of the question. We had jocoque. We didn't have yogurt. So it was very Mexican, and it wasn't until I think she was like, all right, let's try ketchup, dude. I give in. and and then when my nephew moved in, he was about 17 years old, and my mom served him frijoles and chorizo. I was breakfast, and he put ketchup on it, and I was like, dude, what is your problem? What is going on here? Who taught you this? Not me. And so, you know, it's to me, even though like it's a funny poem, a lot of people like it. I feel like it does talk about um our generational cultures, within one household, right? And how we identify with certain things, how like fresh tortillas or market bought tortillas,
Mhm.
all of that has to do with how we identify. As food is important, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so I always like to talk about those things, and people are like, what do you mean you're gonna write about a guayaba? Well, guayaba is international. All kinds of cultures use it, eat it, love it. And that's my connection to my culture in Michoacan, my family side of the family. And they even have a whole festival in Zitácuaro, Michoacan, which is where my family's from, about guayaba. So you have guayaba everything all over, you know. So if you hate guayaba, don't go there. Don't go, don't go there.
That's yeah, that's interesting. The blouse I'm wearing tonight, it's from
Mm.
Michoacan. It's a sister, so
Ah.
shout out to Hermana Beth Alonso. She's from Michoacan, and I've been
Mm-hmm.
looking for like regional, indigenous produced. You know what I mean? Like Michoacan
Mm-hmm.
clothing. So awesome, awesome. Michoacan's in the house. Este,
Yeah.
oh yeah, question for you. So
Monday.
what did your family members, right? Your mom, your nephew,
Uh-huh.
how do they respond when they know you wrote a poem about them? Like how do you tell them? How do you, what's their reaction
What's up?
when you told them?
Um, my nephew was like, "What?" Like, what did you say? Right. That's the first question
Oh,
I think from everybody is like, what did you say? I'm like, everything's positive, I try to make it as positive as I can. Um, I try to be very um, intentional. I remember writing a poem about, uh, it was inspired by like personal stuff, but I'm sure a lot of people could connect with it and it could be inspired by anyone. And it doesn't necessarily have to be for me. But I was a little like, I was like, what if my dad reads it? Because I do paint pretty negatively, but that was years ago. So I try to be more intentional of how I'm writing what I'm writing because I want the message to get across, but I don't want people to judge. I mean, they're gonna judge my nephew because of the ketchup, but but not in a negative way, And I feel like people have really connected with it because they're like, oh my god, I have a nephew that's just like that, or I have a niece, or I love ketchup, and I'm like, what? Okay. So it's really cool to see. They have read them. Sometimes I'll let them read it if it doesn't have too many bad words for my mom. Um, but she likes it. She has like this like cool, kind of shyness about it. But she's even kept some of my drafts like this. She'll find in my car, and she'll fold them up and put them in her purse, which I think is cute. I'm like, oh my
Um,
god, my mom. That's like the biggest honor. Like for her to like my shit, like my work. So that's really inspiring. That just keeps me going.
and
Yeah.
you talk about you've been writing poetry for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Can you remember what your first poem was about, or what made you write a poem? When did you know you were a poet?
Um, I knew I was a poet when I was in middle school, but the first time I wrote poetry was, I think, first grade. I think I was like 7 years old. Our teacher was very creative, very into the arts, and she asked us a question like, what does a kite say when it's flying up high? But in Spanish, because I was in a bilingual education program. So she asked it in Spanish, and I answered it. And in Spanish, I feel, like, because that is the language that we grew up speaking. That is my first language. Um, it was very poetic. And I was like, and then I read it later when I was older. I found it. And I was like, "I wait, es entonces." um, but writing my first poem, I was in sixth grade, Nimitz, Nimitz Middle School, which is in Huntington Park. Um, I had a teacher who was really into poetry. And I remember I wrote my poem in 5 minutes, and he was like, "You didn't write this." And I was like, "Oh, I did. I did." And then he's like, "No, let me see, write another one." I wrote another one. And then he just looked at me like, "Oh, you're one of those. And then he was like, "You should keep a notebook." And I was like, "Okay." So I started keeping little notebooks. Um, I got really serious when I was in the ninth grade. I was taken to this writing retreat, and I just grew from there. I bloomed from there, because it was nurtured. And I feel like a lot of kids are not being, a lot of kids in that I grew up with didn't nurture their art. Some of them were, some of them weren't. And I feel like I got really lucky. And it was nurtured for a small amount of time, but as I was able to develop a skill more, and I was able to remember how to edit, how to build something, how to brainstorm, basically not just write, but also how to find structure for it. So that was really cool.
Wow. Wow. So let's go back. So started poetry. I remember I met you at East Los Angeles College,
Mm-hmm.
and you were a poet then as well. So
Mm-hmm.
can you kind of tell us like how you use poetry and how that went into other areas of your life? Like maybe what it took you to, or
Mm-hmm.
projects you're working on, or the idea of the tarjetitas. I mean, this is all very poetic, work that you're doing. So
um I started at ELAC. It was like in 2005. I had been in Pasadena in Pasadena City College for some time, and I dropped out. During that time, it was after 9/11. A bunch of people, friends of ours, had gone to fight a war that was senseless. I think every war is senseless. But that was the first time that it really impacted me. And that was the first time that um, it hit me really hard. I lost one of my closest friends, and I didn't know how to get up from that. And I had to drop out of school. Um, and I cut everybody off from my life. I didn't know how to like get out of that depression. I ended up deciding to go back to school. I took a year off, went back to school. So in 2005, I went to ELAC. I was taking a Chicano study course, and they're like, "There's open mic or poetry reading," and I was like, "What? Poetry reading? I always wanted to go to one." My first one was at the Achuchas, which was in Silmar at the time. It's still, actually they're still in Silmar. Um, But my second one where I was like, I want to go was at ELAC. And that's when I saw you. I saw your friend, and I was like, oh my God, her voice. If you haven't heard Citlalli, you have to hear her. Her voice is awesome when you read
Oh,
poetry.
thank you.
And that's what caught my attention. I was like, well, first, obviously, because, we have similar names,
Yeah.
but also I was like, otra, all right, unite, but and it felt so cool to have that connection. I had never seen that. People would always chew up my name and be like, what were your parents thinking? And I was like, they were smart. That's what they were thinking. And
Exactly.
that's how they were thinking, smart. So I went to this poetry reading, and I was like, oh, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to read, not just write it, but show it. And then I got involved with like some student organizations, and they were like, oh, Citlalli is a poet. And I was like, yeah, but not about this stuff. So then I was like, you know what? I should really try to write about certain struggles or certain things that I see my friends going through. And then I was like, it doesn't feel right to write about them. It feels I should write about my own shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I started writing about, like my body, um, the types of loves I had, um, the way people thought that I should be loving people. And at first I was very criticized because they're like, you're not writing about the revolution. I'm like, what revolution? Espérate. you know, like chill. And they're like, no, but you should write about like the revolution. And I was like, but I don't know it. I mean, I know because I study, but I don't live it. So we write what we live.
Right.
And I was like, they're like, but about love. And I go, no, look at it. Read it right. It is about love, but it's about the type of love that people expect me to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And so that took me to different states. I went to Denver, met some poets there. I went to UC Davis, which I had never done in my life. Culture shock, total culture shock. UC Davis is way different. I went to Turlock. I went to just different areas, places, colleges, made connections, which I never thought that I could do on my own. I connected with a lot of professors, which was really cool and different. And then I started to go to this space in Boyle Heights years and years later. Actually, like 4 years after, I met this group or a space called Corazón del Pueblo, which is in Boyle Heights. It was in Boyle Heights. And they welcomed me with open arms, which was really refreshing because it didn't happen often. And especially when we think the way we do, we have the name that we have, people already have this assumption, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, oh, you're from there. And I'm like, what do you mean from there? Like, what are you talking about? And so I was starting to get, como se dice, really anxious. I was like, I need a space that's going to let me participate in that space. That's what it did. So I started to host events there, started to host open mics there. And I also got involved with other organizations that I worked with about 10 years. And I think I left that organization because I felt like it was time for me to go somewhere else and do work around my area, around the area that I live. Because there's so much talent here. And sometimes, we have to leave home to be able to share our talents, right? So I made it a point to stay closer to home. And we had started something with my friends, two or three of my friends here in Southeast LA. It didn't really work out. It wasn't the time for it to happen. And in 2014, I found another space and a friend who I became really close with. And the space is Alivio Open Mic, which you've been to, and everybody loved you there.
Oh, thank
And
you. Shout
and
out
it was,
Alivio. Shout
yeah.
out. We'll put the link here.
Yes, and Alivio has been doing a lot, but it also allowed us to showcase a lot of talent that's around the area, and it became kind of known. Alivio became known as like the first timers place. So a lot of folks that would go there and share their poetry were first timers, because a lot of spaces that were around were very intimidating, right? Like you would sign up for an open mic and then they would like push you down because they want to put up their friends, and we don't do that. So that's been really cool. You know, it took me there. And then from Alivio, we were able to do the Cella Arts Festival, which it should be happening every year. Unfortunately, this year, because of our current situation, we're not able to do it live, but we're going to be doing it virtually, which is another challenge that we're willing to accept. And not to like really just put our community out there. But I think that, you know, this poetry, this 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 passion that I have for poetry has really, it's taken me to a lot of places. I went to New Orleans, I went to Texas a whole bunch of times, to New Mexico a whole bunch of times. We've done workshops there. I worked with students that are on probation. You know, I've tried to help them, and I say try because, you know, students, when they're, students, if they don't want to be there, they're gonna be like, oh my God, writing is so stupid.
Yeah.
But what I realized at the end, when my boss asked them what they learned, I was so amazed at what they were able to take in. I was like, oh my God, they're sponges. You know, I forget that they're sponges, but I'm so happy that they were able to take that and then use that question, because all the questions that we asked, all the prompts were about where are they from, how, you know, like about their identity, about who they are. And I feel like a lot of people have never asked them that question. They're constantly being told that they're not good because they're troublemakers, because of whatever, you know. And I feel like, you know, there's very few of us that do care about youth. And we have to ask these questions to the youth, you know. So I feel like poetry has been able to allow me that platform to to be able to reach out to these kids, you know, to not to youth as well. You know, even at Alivio, we had a lot of youth come through, and we've made it a point to keep it safe for not only youth, for LGBT community, for women, because there's not a lot of spaces that are out there that are like that. You know, a lot of times, you know, we even do like a mujer poetry night there at Alivio Open Mic, because when I did it the first time just to try it out, women, the feedback that I got from a lot of the sisters, a lot of the women, was beautiful. And I was like, oh my God, like a little something so small that seems so small was a big deal for them, you know. And I feel like, and even though I'm more behind the scenes now, and I miss performing, I miss being out there and reading poetry. I also like to be behind the scenes, you know, and produce things like that, because there's a need for it, you know, and I get to see that. So, and with the cards, I had writer's block. I couldn't write anything, and my friend had learned how to carve blocks, linoleum. So I was like, oh, you know, it would be funny if we had a card that had like this saying on it. And I had seen my friends creating greeting cards with their photography and with like their art. I was like, dude, it would be really cool. Let me try this. And I tried it, and my first one was like como chingas. And people were like, oh my God, I'm gonna give it to my mom because this is what she always tells me. And that's like my number one seller for Mother's Day and for Father's Day. And then what was the other one? Estas son las mañanitas. I don't think there was anybody that was doing it. Now more people are doing it. And then I did another one that said sana sana colita de rana. And my favorite one is cuídate cabrona, and hold on, and no no te pendejes. And when people read that one, they just lose they lose it, because they're like, oh my God, my grandma always tells me this. And I'm like, well, where's the wisdom? Pa que vean, you know? And I feel like people don't take it so offensively. They see it as terms of endearment, which I'm very happy that they do. That's kind of the love language that we have, sort of. Right. And we're very careful. And I feel like it depends on how you deliver it. the intention that you have behind it, that's how it's gonna work, you know. And then the other one that's always been a favorite, it is chingona. It
Yeah.
is chingona. It's very simple, but very to the point and very powerful, I feel, you know. And it's been really fun to create cards for people to see their reactions. When they see them, they laugh and they immediately think of who to give it to. I feel like whenever my mom laughs at a card that I make, I was like, it's gonna do good,
The hit.
you know?
The hit.
Yeah. And I was like, dude, it has her blessing, you know? And it's just, you know, people just, they like them, and I'm happy that they do. And I didn't think I was going to continue to do this, but it's been 5 years and it just keeps growing. And then I'm happy, you know, with that.
And for people watching this, I will have a link of that. What's the name of the whole business?
It's called Tarjetitas con Amor.
Tarjetitas con amor. Okay.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah,
it was,
all the social, all the handles are going to be down here. And everyone, I will show pictures of this on the video as well. And I bought one. I remember the first one I bought is Menchina's La Piel.
oh yeah.
And I gave that to my husband. I was like,
oh,
when I give it.
I have some cute ones, some romantic ones, you know.
Yeah, those ones.
Yeah.
And it just, it's powerful, I think, for a lot of us, because it's like, it's cultural, but you also feel like it's celebrating these expressions that we're used to, but we're not used to seeing them like on a Hallmark card or
Exactly.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I love it. I love the whole idea of empowering and being relatable and celebrating, because that's stuff that we know, right? That we grew up.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
that's beautiful. I love tarjetitas con amor. I love it. I love it.
Oh,
I love it.
thanks, friend.
I love it. And if we can get into a little bit more of, for people watching this, right? This is poetry. We just had a poetry reading with Citlalli. We're talking about, you really highlight, talking about grandmothers, talking about your mom, talking about your nephew. I think a lot of the times, right, these stories don't get told, right? Or we're not taught that it's a beautiful thing. Like mainstream is not talking about this. We're still not represented how we should be. And so I think I love your poetry, because I think you tell stories in ways that are that resonate with us, and it celebrates at the same time, but it makes it feel like it's a beautiful thing, because I'm sure your mom is happy to hear it. The poems about fire and our grandmothers, like there's so much story and culture to us as a people, especially women, and poetry, that I think it's important. Like the work that you're doing is offering gifts of empowerment, and it's really telling the stories and telling the stories ourselves, because you're writing this poetry, you're performing it, you're putting it together, and you're making that experience as a poet available to other poets, right? Because you know how important that is, like with Alivio and Southeast LA Arts, beautiful stuff. And ending the interview, I just wanted to get into, for people watching this for the first time, right? People watching this for the first time, they think they're poets, they're not sure if they're poets, they're shy about it, they're not sure. You know, what can you tell them, especially this time and during quarantine, right? A lot of us start thinking about things. We get a little existential. We start thinking like, oh my gosh, like, what would you tell them listening to this? How would you inspire them or encourage them, right, to write a poem or to follow their passion, making tarjetas, making art? What's something that you would tell someone watching this for the first time and that's kind of not sure if this is their call?
You're gonna question yourself a lot. I still question myself. I still question myself, but if you feel like this is something that's important to you and you feel like it's needed, um, because it is important to tell our stories, and that's something we can't let other people tell our stories, you know. And we've seen that our generation, the generation before us, has seen that when other people tell our stories, we get omitted, you know. We're not included in it. So I feel that continue to tell your story. It doesn't matter how. Try new mediums, try, painting, try to cross pollinate, you know do different types. And if that medium sticks to you, then continue on with that. And just know that practice makes perfect, because a lot of times I'm like, oh my God, this is not coming out right, or this isn't right, or I'm trying something new. And the important part, anywhere, any workshop that you take, any video that you see, any tutorial that you see, the one thing that they always say is practice makes perfect. You're not going to get it right the first time or the 20 times. You'll get it right when it's time for you to get it right. Don't give up. If this is something that you really want to do, don't give up. I never thought in a million years that I was going to continue to be writing, sharing poetry, making cards, being an activist. I never in my life thought, oh, I'm going to be, working with community. Never, ever. Or working with a publishing company. Never, But I feel like if this is something you want to do, try it out. Watch. For me, it was like watching Def Comedy Jam, Def Poetry Jam, and there was and just um watching videos. Now we have so much accessibility. Everything's is available online.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then if you want to be a writer, read a lot, because you want to keep your brain expanding, and just learning like new languages. Even if it is in English, it's still very different, depending on the region where the writer's from. They have a complete different language or a way of speaking or a way of writing. And always, always, always write with the language that you speak, whether it's slang, that colloquial language. Use that, because you will connect more with a lot of people when you're more true to who you are.
Wow. That's beautiful. Wow. Wow. And last question.
Okay.
I was like, okay, no, wait, one more. So, what is poetry? What is poetry to you?
Whew. Oh my God. That's like,
Next video.
oh, but that next video, hold on. Let me know. I think poetry is that thing that lives within you. I always say it lives in my belly, because that's where I get the sensation first. So it lives within you, and it's also a way of it's a way of thinking. Our ancestors did that. It was a philosophy. It was how we questioned existence, right? And I feel like, I mean, who the heck is gonna write about ketchup? No one is ever gonna. No one's ever gonna write about ketchup or guayabas. I mean, some people will. I did, but it is. I feel like the philosophy of how and why you're asking these questions, like how can you do that, and you're sort of answering them. But I feel like that is philosophy. It is a philosophy. It's a way for us to tell our stories. But it really, I feel like it does live like somewhere in your gut, and it's like that feeling, that nervousness, those butterflies that you have in there. It's so much, it's love, it's anger, it's hope, it's it's our universe, it's the universe. Like, really just go out there and ask, how is that star there, and I mean, so many people have asked that question, but it's up to us to really put it down on paper, or on pen or on a computer or wherever, but just write it down. Yeah, and I feel like it's a love language. It's a love language. It's not like romantic love, but it is a love language to ourselves as well. That's what I think.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for answering. Well, with that, I will wrap up this moment. I want to thank you for sharing space. I want to thank you for sharing your gifts, those 3 beautiful poems.
Oh.
Everyone watching this, I will put all the links if you want to get in contact with Citlalli, if you want to know what she's up to. And also Tarjetitas con Amor.
Yeah, con amor. Tarjetitas con amor.
Con Amor. And it's
yeah.
beautiful, beautiful tarjetas. So we, especially right now, quarantine is a good time to send tarjetas. Let's send tarjetitas and cheer each other up and
exactly
keep going. So Xitlalic, thank you again for sharing that with us. I hope that we've inspired someone that's out there in the world of this video and YouTube. And just like yourself, you know, like you said, not a lot of our poets are nurtured, and sometimes it doesn't get nurtured. Unfortunately, they don't think much about their poetry and their writing, and kind of dwindles away. But I'm glad, you know, that that teacher asked you to keep a journal. I'm glad you went on and took the courage, because it takes courage to share our vulnerable thoughts and, like you're saying, the insecurities, and you're always questioning yourself. But I'm very thankful that you continued that path, and thank you again for sharing. It's been amazing. Listening to your poetry is always beautiful and an experience that people should witness, and I'm glad that you shared that with everyone. So
no, thank you for having me and inviting me. This is, like I was telling you, you know, people have asked and I was like, I'm not ready. But when you asked me, I was like, I'm ready.
Thank you. Thank
you.
So
no, thank you. It was awesome seeing you, even though, you know, we're far away, but, you know, we have this technology to connect us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Citlalli.
Alrighty.
Be safe. Take care. Let's stay connected and follow up with us. Information will be at the bottom of this video. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Good night. Good night.